The really big point that I try and make in my work, which escapes many people, is that actually egalitarian societies do exist. And many people, including anthropologists who read the work of anthropologists like me, who spent many years living with people like this, learning their language, becoming integrated into their life and society, when we come back and we say, look, these people actually don't have hierarchies, they don't have gender inequality, they don't have ageism or sexism, they don't have genetocratic systems where elders dominate youngers, youth. They think that it's somehow wishful thinking, that somehow we're imposing our own left-wing type views on the people we're studying. Of course, I find that a highly offensive position, because it really does sort of suggest that somehow I'm lying and cheating, and not just me, but a whole group of anthropologists who for many years now have been going to work with hunter-gatherer societies and discovering that yes, actually it is possible for human beings to live without social hierarchy. And so what I'll be doing today is introducing some of the ways that that egalitarian system works, and not just this system, but indeed there are general structural principles that we can elucidate from many societies like the Mbendjeles who are egalitarian, and that allows us to better understand how it is that human beings can live together without hierarchy and inequality. And I think this is a really important thing we need to remind ourselves on, because actually we're at one of those critical junctures in the history of humanity, where I was just at a conference on sustainable resources, and the head of the UN Environment Programme, a guy called something Steiner, gave a talk, a 15-minute talk, and one of the most extraordinary things that he said is that the decisions that humanity as a whole is making in the next 20 years are going to have repercussions on humanity for the next 2,000 years. This really is a moment of really very crucial significance for the way that we continue to exist on this planet. And while we often phrase the problems in ecological terms, I think the problems are actually far more social and political than anybody is willing to recognise, and the inadequacy of our political system to make the sorts of ecological decisions that we require in order for the extraordinary things that have been created by humanity over the centuries is just not happening. And so what we really need to do is to try and tap into the extraordinary living experiments that go on all across the world as people try and live their lives through different systems, through different structures, and make those lives meaningful lives, and lives which everyone can find their place in. So the egalitarian structures of these hunter-gatherers are, I think, really important for reminding us of the possibilities that are available to humanity. And one just has to hope that, given the seriousness of the situation facing us as a species globally, we really need to start thinking very hard and acting very strongly to change the way that we are living. Just recently I was looking at some figures. 50% of the resources made available to humanity are currently consumed by 2% of humanity. When you talk about a demographic time bomb, it's rubbish. It's not a demographic time bomb. It's a distribution time bomb. It's a question of equity. It's a question of how we organise ourselves so that there are flows of things to everybody equally, and not just to the elite few. Anyway, just to put into context why I do think these things are very important, and indeed, fortunately, other people do too, but still not enough. Apparently, Mao Zedong, when he began the Great March, he said, if I can make 5% of China communist, then China will be communist, which I thought was quite insightful. But I've just read there's some people who've been doing some work, some biological anthropologists, on revolutions, and whether peaceful revolutions or violent revolutions which are more effective. And they came up with and this is what the figures say, very interestingly, peaceful revolutions are far more effective than violent revolutions. Why? Well, because the critical mass appears not to be 5%, but 3.5%. If you can get 3.5% of the population out on the streets in peaceful demonstration, you can change the entire system. And peaceful demonstrations tend to do it better than violent demonstrations because the violence puts off people from joining. Whereas if the demonstration is peaceful, then the numbers increase much more, powerfully, much more substantially, and you have a better chance of reaching the 3.5% threshold that seems to be the critical mass for radical change in human governance. Anyway, I thought you Marxists might enjoy that little piece of biological anthropology. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about Congo Basin hunter-gatherers. They're probably the largest group of hunter-gatherers on the planet currently. About 350,000 people, difficult to estimate because nobody bothers counting them, and possibly up to 500,000 people. But what's very interesting is that you have a whole range of different situations and ways that people live. But there are a core of practices and beliefs which they all share, despite having different languages, very different political and social situations today. And the groups we're going to be talking about are particularly the Mbendjele that are just here. But the process, it's a set of prohibitions that are called ekila, which I'll be talking to you about tonight, are something which spread from the Atlantic coast all the way across to here. Among the Mbuti it's called ekeri, and if you know about linguistics, R and L is a standard slippage that happens in languages, so ekeri and ekila are basically the same word, despite these groups genetically, we know now, haven't been in contact for 18,000 years. So what we're talking about here are really archaic symbolic structures that are absolutely central to the whole business of being human and living together, and indeed reproducing ourselves effectively. This blood symbolism is essentially what Ekila is about, and just so that you get this basic structural issue straight away, it is the blood of women, which is the blood of menstruation, which is the blood of fertility of humanity, which is the sign that a woman can procreate, is one crucial type of blood that must be kept very distinct from the blood that men cause to fall, that they spill when they kill animals to eat. Now, both these bloods are vital for human society to continue. Of course, people in Western societies can be vegans and vegetarians and so on. But if you weren't living in a place where your food was being farmed or produced in supermarkets for you, you would find it far more difficult to live in that fashion. As a hunter-gatherer, which is the default sort of economic system of humanity, you do need to kill. And that killing causes blood to flow, and that is the blood that men will manage. And the blood that women cause to flow, which is about procreation, giving birth, and the possibility of life, is something which needs to be very clearly demarcated from that. And the symbolic system around this blood is not just found among hunter-gatherers. You can find it all over the world. There's some very interesting work tracing it out in different European cultures. In France, for instance, traditionally butchers could never be women. You couldn't mix those bloods. A woman who is menstruating cannot go to take mass. The whole problem of the blood of Jesus not mixing with this blood of fertility, the blood of killing again, which is actually what happens to it.
It doesn't want competition.
Well, the church doesn't, yeah. Who knows what he thinks or thought. So it's a system of taboos which organises how these things are kept separate, but also how the products of these things are to be shared among the people who exist. So at the same time as being something about, just think about sharing for a moment, sharing in and sharing out. So we have this word sharing, and we just think, sharing means handing stuff around. Well, actually, there's sharing in an emotion, sharing in laughter, sharing in a taste, sharing in a place, sharing in an experience. And that is something which is different to sharing out. Sharing out a food, a meat, whatever it might be, your sexuality. These are things which you share out. And we call everything sharing, but you can see very quickly that sharing actually is as much about coming together as it is about separating out. And because of our economic obsession in the West we just think about the sharing out bit and much less about the sharing in bit. But actually for hunter-gatherers, what they're really interested in is the sharing in stuff. It's about being in community, it's about doing things together. And so, for instance, many hunter-gatherers will never talk about a person as an individual. Rather, they will talk about that person in interaction with other people. So you don't talk about Jerome and what he does, you talk about Jerome how he talked, or Jerome how he collaborated in this particular endeavour, or whatever it might be. It's a very different way of thinking about who we are. So for hunter-gatherer people, it's the sharing in that matters as much as the sharing out of the things that we require for our lives to continue. So this sharing covers things like the meat of dead animals, but it also covers things like laughter. What's appropriate to laugh at and what's inappropriate to laugh at? What's appropriate sexual behaviour? What's inappropriate sexual behaviour? How you treat children, what you can eat when you are pregnant or when you're not pregnant, what you can do when you're pregnant or not pregnant. So many different things. In fact, it ends up touching so many different areas of life that I think it's better understood as a sort of managed forest management system. It's a way that the Mbendjele have organically developed over the eons to live in a forest which is abundant, that provides everything they need. The idea of famine or scarcity is really, well, scarcity not so much, but famine, the idea that anyone could starve to death, that's what they say, starvation, is like, you know, it's like me telling you that at any moment we're going to run out of oxygen and we're all going to drop dead. You just think, nah, come on, there's loads of the stuff, it's everywhere, we just open the window, we'll get more of it. And that's how the Mbendjele think about food and the resources you need for life. The idea that you can starve, nah, crazy, look, we'll just go over there, there's loads of the yams, I know where they are, they're just over there. And so that confidence in the ability of the forest to provide changes everything. We're constantly angsting about where that next bit of cash will come so we can buy this bit of food or whatever it is we need for our lives. Well, constantly angsting, probably exaggerating, but there is a general sense that we are insecure. If we don't think about the future, then we won't have anything to eat tomorrow. So we need to think, well, what am I going to do to get some money this week? What am I going to do to whatever it is? Whereas for the hunter-gatherers, the position is different because you have this thing, the forest all around you, that really does enable you to be confident that you will have what you need for your life. You don't need to stress about it. And then suddenly you can start thinking about other things like having a laugh, like doing things together, like having a snooze, all sorts of things that if you're on the treadmill of industrial capitalist culture, become a sort of luxury. They're what you do in your leisure time. These are the things you... Anyway, so it really is a very different world, and I think actually that it's very much underappreciated the extent to which our delayed return systems, and I'll explain a bit more about this later, transform the way we experience being in the world from the immediate return systems, these egalitarian systems that I'm going to be talking about tonight. So I've given you a sort of brief introduction to Aquila, this business of blood. It's about sharing, it's about how you share things properly. And that sounds very simple, but actually it took me years to figure out. And it really wasn't obvious at all how these things are connected to begin with. And this actually just, to be understood, really you need to understand that culture, this thing that we all take for granted that animates how we greet each other, how we say hello, how we know where to sit, or for instance, none of you are talking. If you were Mbendjele, this just wouldn't be the case. If I say something and you think it's rubbish, you start going, whoa! And you'll have all sorts of what are called idiophones. There's sort of expressive sounds which will reflect your response to what I'm saying. Whereas because we're in this culture and we're used to these hierarchical situations where I'm supposed to know and you're supposed not to know, and here I am giving you knowledge and you're absorbing it. These are systems which are basically placing me as someone who knows and you as people who don't know, and therefore me. Anyway, this sort of thing is just unacceptable in these sorts of hunter-gatherer societies. And so the thing about culture is that it's never fully complete. There isn't something called British culture that you can put in a box and you can list in the way some, what was that lady's name? Anyway, the British, understanding the British or something.
Fox.
Fox, yeah.
Understanding
Kate
English.
Fox, yeah, the English, watching the English.
Kate Fox.
You know, there isn't this thing that can be said to be English. Actually, it depends where you go. It depends who you talk to. It depends how old they are. Go and talk to some of the kids living on this estate about what being English means, and you'll find quite a different response to going, I don't know, to some public school and talking to kids there, or to a community of second-generation Sudanese immigrants and asking them. You know, the range of versions of what being English is huge, and it's not encompassed anywhere in one place or another. It's something that's distributed. It's a distributed system, and it's incomplete. And actually, it's very changeable, and thank goodness it's changeable, of course. But how it changes is interesting because it doesn't change at a similar rate among all people. Some people will find that they're very comfortable with this particular version of being English, and so that's how they'll be in their lives. And other people will start to innovate and add things and build it up in different ways. So all of culture and particular cultural concepts are understood differently by different people in that same culture, and that is absolutely normal. But it's very rarely taken into account when people try and describe culture, the way it changes and shifts as we grow older. And so the idea behind this picture is just to explain that the idea of ekila is not something which you will find, you do tend to find it among elder people like Fatah here. He has a fairly clear-cut idea of ekila. But Esimba up there, who's just, that's his second born, he's got a very different, much more emergent understanding of ekila. And ekila is actually very clever because it latches onto people at different points in their lives in different ways. And through engaging with things that have to happen, you have to eat. So ekila fixes on what you eat and what people around you are eating as a way of making you wake up to its existence. And then as you become you start your first menstruations as a woman, when you start hunting as a man, then other aspects of ekila emerge. And ekila builds up as you go through your life. And it's never complete. So even Fatah is still developing his appreciation and understanding of ekila. And it's enormously frustrating because I did a lot of the research that I did for writing a paper on ekila that I did some years ago, when I spoke to Fatah about 15 years ago. And just recently I was talking to him, he's changed all the animals, well not all of them, but a whole bunch of animals have changed that he calls ekila, and you know, all sorts of innovations and things have gone on. But I mean, you know, if I was to, and I will one day have to do it, re-record all the changes, and then I'll analyse that and see where it takes me. It'll be very interesting. But the point is that these concepts are very plastic. And although they have a core of sort of instruction that they lead you to understand, they do so in a way which is appropriate to your particular life situation. And that is true of all culture. I mean, just think of the concept of father. You know, as a little kid, if you had a father around and you saw that father, you'd have one particular idea of what father is. And if you didn't have a father around, you'd have another particular idea of what father is. And then as you grow up and you become a pubescent young man, your idea of father becomes quite something else. And as you finally create the space for you to feel that you are, you know, a man yourself, and you start to have your own children, and you become a father, then again, your idea of what being father is changes. And as your children, as you watch them grow and their interaction with you changes, so does too your understanding of what being a father is about. So culture is this process of engagement with the same contexts, the same concepts, as we move through different ages and contexts. And so, you know, it's important to understand that. So what I try to do in this analysis of ekila is integrate that into the analysis, the way that your understanding of ekila emerges as you grow older. And if you read anthropology, you'll see that very often it's this end of the spectrum which attracts the anthropologist's interest, because the elder people have had a time to digest, to reflect on what being father means in all those different stages of life. And so when you come as the anthropologist with your notepad and your interview and you start asking questions about what's fatherhood in this culture, you'll get a much more complete and deep answer from people at the end of the thing than you will at the beginning. And so Sandy Robertson, a very nice anthropologist, he put it like this, that actually what most anthropology you read is a geriatric phenomenon. It's largely what these people have come to understand rather than what these people have come to understand. And so, it really is important, I think, to integrate more of this way that concepts, cultural concepts, move through people's lives, informing them in different ways as different conundrums, conflicts, issues emerge, and that things aren't fixed in any simplistic way, but they are interactive as we move through life and we change ourselves. Oh, by the way, Chris, how long have I got?
You've got 35 minutes from now.
35 minutes.
Or 40 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, it's quite flexible, but...
All right, no, I just wanted to know so I don't ramble on too much.
of having a window a little bit?
That stuff, yeah, that we all need.
Is that enough? If you want another window, then can we do one over there?
So, people have said that the societies, I mean, there's one particular anthropologist who rather provocatively suggested that because they're egalitarian, you can't have anyone who can judge. And it's true, there's nobody here who can judge other people. Because once you start judging, you're implying that you're somehow better, that you have more knowledge than someone else. And so, Brunton, his name is Ron Brunton, and he argues that, egalitarian societies are just accidental assemblages of random practices. There can't be any sort of system to them because there's nobody to judge. If you're doing a wrong thing or if you're doing a right thing, no one's going to say, oh, you're doing wrong, we shouldn't do that, because that's judgment. But actually I want to argue, and I do argue quite strongly, that this is a false understanding of these societies, that actually they have symbolic superstructures, if you like, which organise the way that new things are incorporated, new things are addressed, new things are dealt with. And these symbolic superstructures are actually particularly focused on this issue of blood. And I think it's actually, and I'm sure there are a few people who agree with me here, who worked on it far more than I have, that it is actually at the core of the human division of labour. And our whole understanding of gender emanates from this business of blood. It really is very much at the centre of human society and human being. So these people live in small camps, between 10 and 60 people, depending on what's happening. If we've killed an elephant, we'll quickly get up to 60 people, and they'll be feasting and singing and dancing and partying until the elephant's finished. But if we're just doing our sort of little roaming, it may just be 5 or 6 people. And I have come across really tiny little camps, just two mates and their families sitting there quietly in their little remote part of the forest. So these people move very easily. Your entire belongings can pack into a basket that's just this size. So if someone annoys you, someone's trying to put pressure on you to do something you don't want to do, you don't even need to argue about it. You just get up and go. And you can pack your bags in an hour and off you go. You can rebuild your new hut in a couple of hours at wherever it is you decide to camp. And this flexibility is called avoidance strategy in terms of politics. It's a way of avoiding anyone who tries to assert power, control, authority over you, or ask you to do things that you're not interested in. Divorce in these societies is very easy. If you're fed up with your husband or wife, you don't even need to explain why you're fed up. You just get up and go. And they have no right to force you, to hold you back, to stop you. And you just will go back to wherever you like. Kinship in these societies is generalised. So anyone who arrives can be considered kin. And people will very often use kin terms to even address people who are relative strangers. And the idea is that you welcome all, that you cannot exclude anyone. So I have a number of very close friends who are lepers and really do have their fingers slowly disappearing, their feet disappearing, huge holes, poor guy I just saw in September. But there's no way that they can be ostracized. They are part of the community. They are, have to be present, shared with in the way that everybody is shared with. So these are societies who don't bother necessarily resolving conflicts. If I have an argument with somebody, I don't need to sort it out. I can just get up and go. And often time is a great healer. You don't need to resolve every problem you have. You can just leave it. And then over time you realise, well, it's not actually that important in the grand scheme of things. I might have been hot about it then, but it really doesn't matter. And one thing to notice in this picture is the spatial gendered arrangement of people. So in the middle of camp you have the men, and they're sitting around a little mutulaka table, a smoking table where we have a bit of antelope and pig meat that we're saving up because we want to go and do a ritual in another place. And then all around the huts you have the women, and the women are doing whatever they are. You can see a bloke actually, he's just having a quick secret munch in there. Doesn't want any, I don't know if you can see that, you can't, sorry. But with less light you might see it. Anyway, but basically, people are separated very often in their day-to-day lives according to gender. And so much so that some of the neighbouring villagers, farmers, when they come into these camps, they say, it's like two societies. You've got women on the one side and men on the other. But actually, that's part of how women are able to resist the brawn of men. Men do generally tend to be stronger than women. And so women, in order to resist that strength, have strong solidarity. And Akila plays a critical role in how that solidarity is maintained and created. But first, I just want to just briefly run over a couple of the key elements that, and James Woodburn really did, unpick the basic structure of egalitarianism in these short. So it's a very good article if any of you want to read it. 1982, Egalitarian Societies is what it's called. Equality is achieved through direct individual access to resources, to the means of coercion, and to mobility. So I've talked a bit about mobility, but access to resources is really important. No one can stop me from just getting up and walking into the forest and collecting whatever it is I need to eat. And nobody will try and stop me. And that really is important, that there's nobody, I don't need to ask permission, I don't need to, the forest is there for all creatures to share. And indeed, the Mbendjele say, Komba created the forest for all creatures to share. The means of coercion. There are poisoned arrows, there are spears, there are machetes, and even now firearms in most camps. And so if I really annoy you, it doesn't matter that I may be stronger than you. You just can pick up a poison arrow, and while I'm asleep, chuck me in the butt, and then 5 minutes later I'm in the throes of my last moments and die. So it really, people, it's a bit that Cold War principle. We better not push it too far because the consequences could be really devastating. And so this direct access by all to coercion, there's no one who has a monopoly on coercion. If I have a monopoly on coercion, boy, you can all suffer and no one will be able to make any fuss to me about it. But if we all have a control of the means of coercion, then we actually need to start cooperating. We need to start being a bit more respectful to one another, not pushing the other too far, because there is that final solution that's available to anybody and everybody. And indeed, the first act in fighting, when Mbendjele fight, is to hug each other. And it sounds, it looks a bit odd when you're not, why are they hugging? They were just shouting at each other. But what they're doing is they're actually feeling the tension in each other's bodies. And there's an enormous amount of kinetic, if I'm furious and you touch me, you'll feel my fury. And if you're not quite so furious, and I touch you, I'll feel that you're not really that furious about it. And very quickly, actually, the conflict will just disappear, because you'll think, oh, no, he's really pissed off about this. It doesn't matter, come on, let's call it a day. But on the other hand, if we feel that really, whoa, and then, so then we go to the next level, which is, standard fisticuffs and all that, and then there are other levels as well, if we still can't sort it out. So, and then mobility, that if, I'm unhappy, or I need more food, or whatever it is, or people are just putting too much pressure on me, whatever it might be, I can just go, and no one can stop me. Procedures that impose sharing and prevent saving and accumulation. And this is really crucial in these societies, because if someone is saving and accumulating, that means that in a moment of scarcity, they suddenly have the ability to assert control over you. If you need the thing that they have, then, as we well know here with banks and so on, they have the ability to impose all sorts of things on you that you may be very unhappy about. And so these societies do what we call demand sharing. And I'll explain a little bit more about the difference between demand sharing and what we normally think of as sharing in a moment. So through mechanisms that allow goods to circulate without making people dependent on one another. And it's very interesting. This is an area where all the egalitarian societies that I've read about have particular mechanisms for ensuring that certain things which may be difficult to get, particularly iron arrowheads, which of course are much more ubiquitous nowadays, but in the past were really important to get hold of because they represent such an improvement on stone arrowheads, or ivory arrowheads, as the hunter-gatherers I work with in the Congo used to use shards of tusk as blades. And so in the San Bushmen, for instance, they have a system where people will gift arrowheads to each other. And when hunters go out hunting, they remember who each arrowhead belongs to. And when they kill an animal with that arrowhead, that animal belongs to the owner of the arrowhead, not the hunter, who may have walked for 6 hours in the hot sun and really nearly died killing the animal. It doesn't belong to him, it belongs to the owner of the arrowhead. And so he has to bring the animal back to the camp in which the owner of the arrowhead lives. And so that keeps these arrowheads circulating. The Hadza that James Woodburn worked with, they gamble. And men apparently spend more time gambling than they did hunting. And it's just this game of chance, chucking, what is it, little stones or something? Yeah, just little stones up against a tree. And that would serve
pure
for...
chance.
Yes, it really is a...
Nobody can know.
And arrowheads and other things circulate through this. In the Mbendjele case, they do it through ritual. So they have this very elaborate ritual system, which we'll be talking about a bit next week, where in order to get access to particular technologies of enchantment, techniques for making people feel awed and enter sort of joyful experiences, those are the things that they value so much. I mean, this one guy, he spent 4 months working for a logging company. He earns, like 400 euros. But instead of buying a gun or something you'd expect him to buy for, to get money and all that, he bought the right to perform a ritual. That was it. He was just so delighted by that's what he wanted to spend all his savings on. And it's quite standard that Mbendjele value that sort of thing much more highly than they do guns and other things. Because actually, you can just borrow them. You just ask someone, "You've got a gun? Give me your gun. I'm going to go hunting." And you say, "Oh, okay, well, as long as you've got a bullet to put in it, take it and off you go." Or, spear or axe or whatever it is you've got. Because this is a demand-sharing system, you can demand the goods you need for your life. And what's very interesting is that this distinction between egalitarian societies and non-egalitarian societies is of the most profound nature. And you can look at political discussions the world over. I haven't yet come across one which varies from this theme, and I'd be happy to know about others. But basically, you either have some groups, it doesn't matter left or right, what you want to call them, but some groups who will argue for more equality, more equity, a greater respect for one another, and then other people who will argue the opposite and say that you need more unique elites, greater hierarchy, and more concentration of goods among some people who will make better decisions for everybody else because they have earned their place. The British system is an example in point. Meritocracy. We're supposed to be an egalitarian society. I sometimes hear people ban this word around without any understanding. So they say we're all born equal in rights and dignity. That somehow all these little babies popping up everywhere are equal. Well, of course, if you think about it a little bit, it's not the case. If you're the wrong colour, you're not going to be equal to someone of the right colour. If you are in the wrong part of the wrong postcode, you won't be equal to someone who's in a different postcode. Your life chances actually are very much coloured by where you are born. But the ideology of our society is that we're all born equal, and then it's through our different levels of merit that we will be more or less successful. And so that's why it's called a meritocracy. We reward merit, and the inequalities that we see in society aren't through some sort of established class system or something else. They are through merit. So people who have power have earned that through their good qualities. That's the ideology, of course. But what you have here is something that's quite different. This really is radical egalitarianism. It's where, despite the differences between people, you end up with an equality of outcomes. So we have a system where we say you all begin equal, and then because of the differences between people, you will have an unequal set of outcomes. These societies say, no, we accept that people are different. People are different. Some of you are good at some things, other people are good at other things. But that shouldn't matter. We should all get the same results in the end. So I'll explain this slide a little bit later on, but just to change that. So although most of us are familiar with delayed return societies, they are the most common forms of social organisation today. In 95% or 96 or 7% of human Homo sapiens sapiens history and 99.5% of Homo history, we were hunter-gatherers. We weren't farmers, pastoralists, or meritocratic capitalists, or whatever. So this really is something that's very fundamental to human nature. It really is crucial. It's perhaps the default human economic system, and you might notice the only other place apart from hunter-gatherers where we really encounter egalitarian systems are in refugee populations after natural disasters. People automatically become very egalitarian. They start sharing on demand. It really is, or you see some of the street people, it's less obvious today because they're so harassed. But I remember, when we used to have Cardboard City at Waterloo and so on, and you could observe how people were coming back with stuff and sharing it with everybody, and they were sharing immediately everything they had, so that it was all consumed there and then. It does seem this is a very fundamental human orientation, that when everything else collapses around us, we automatically can find ourselves again. So it really is something that, although it may not feel familiar to you all, it is actually profoundly within us. And everybody regardless. So there are no leadership roles. You can't have a leader. This is a really important point. There's equality between men and women. There's no authority for one person to tell other people what to do. You can ask politely, but if people say no, there's nothing you can say about it. There's no possible coercion or way that you can impose yourself on them. To the point where as soon as a child can walk, they're said to have their own ikila. And if they don't want to sleep with the parents, they want to sleep with their mate over there, or their auntie, or their grandma, off they go. And the parents don't have the right to say, no, you're not allowed, you've got to come and stay in my hut. That's not something that can be done. If the child wants to, then the child goes. It transforms parental-child relationships. Because your role as a parent then is not to be a mean, discipline. It's to be a loving, caring human being who gets on, who has a friendship with your children rather than this authoritarian relationship. And it really does mean that the whole sets of relationships that we're used to being very problematic can just become quite different to what we're used to. It's rude to ask questions in these societies, because asking questions is like an invasion of your personal space. There's no word for goodbye. You don't say goodbye to people. They just go. And that's really important, because if you start getting into all this sentimentality of goodbyes, it's like, you're saying, stay with me, and that's not right. You've got to let people feel free to move, and they shouldn't have to explain themselves. Like the woman leaving her husband because he's a drunk. She doesn't have to explain herself. She just goes, and that's fine. That is her right. Of course, you can't order anyone to do something for you. And that makes war impossible in these societies. All this rubbish by Steven Pinker and war being the role, is absolute bullshit. It is impossible to have war. You can have rage reaction. For instance, there was a man who speared another man because he wanted the man's wife, and he was a man from another another area, and the men of that area, basically the brothers of this man who was speared, were so furious they killed him. And they killed him as a group. But that was their anger at their brother being killed that led them to do that. There's no way that could be sustained over any period of time, or that could become a sort of a standard practice. It was just a spontaneous reaction to the vicious killing of their brother. And they were pretty vicious in how they killed him. But anyway, it's you can't boast. Boasting is, here we celebrate boasters. They become famous, they become politicians, film stars. They're outcast. And I have a friend who is an amazing elephant hunter. He loves hunting. It's just hunting is an amazing thing if you've ever had the chance to do it at some, not for just trophies, but to actually eat it, where you've got children waiting for the food because they're hungry and all this. It's a different sort of thing. But he can't help himself from hunting, and he boasts about it. And as a result, the women, they didn't say, oh, look, I like you, you get lots of meat. They said, get out of here. We don't want you. What are you hunting so much for? You must be dodgy. We don't want you around. And they kicked him out, and he was exiled from the Mbendjele. He had to go and live with a neighbouring group of Pygmies who were very much more sedentarised and close to a group of villagers and weren't very good at hunting. And there he was celebrated because he had this hunting skill. But I met him, this was, when I first knew him, it was 97, and I just met him in 2012 in yet another group of Pygmies, the Mikaya. So he's basically drifting through the different Pygmies, because he's a Pygmy, but he's not behaving like a Pygmy. He's boasting all the time, and people can't bear it, and so they sent him packing. And he was really, he looked the worse for wear, the poor chap. But anyway, Benasungu was his name. And so this really is a situation that's very different to the one that is practiced by the villagers living right next door, in some cases, to the hunter-gatherers, where they have leaders, they have very strict forms of hierarchy and so on. And indeed, they invest labour, they transform an area of forest and they plant it, and they will then wait for 6 months, and then the manioc grows, and then they come and harvest. And this leads to this investing labour for a delayed return leads to all sorts of consequences. So how do you organise that labour? Who organises that labour? When you've got the harvest, all of a sudden you've got mountains of food. How are you going to organise who gets what? Well, if you want their labour in future, you better make sure that the people who contributed labour get something. But of course, you may also have other ideas about what you can do, and you can manipulate that distribution to your advantage. And gain wealth or status, and socially powerful or effective goods can be obtained through a certain hoarding of the things that are available. And so this delayed return leads to all these hierarchies of inequality, these ability to exert authority. I have a field now that's growing, and if that field is ravaged by Pygmies, and they steal all my manioc, well, I'm not going to have anything to eat. So if I see that pygmy on my field, I'm going to come out with a big stick and I'm going to chase them. Oh, get out of here, you thief! And indeed, Bantus do all the time. And it's one of the reasons why the Mbendjele called Bantus guerrillas. Because guerrillas are extremely territorial. So you're walking along in the forest and suddenly you turn on a twig and this crazy sort of guy comes out, all furry and frightening, and weighing about 300 kg, and shits the crap out of you. And just because you trod on a stick in a bit of forest, and Mbendjele men get furious when guerrillas do that. And they start insulting them with all the rudest words they can think of. And they're not just joking, they're really stroppy with the gorilla for claiming this as like mine. As far as the Mbendjele are concerned, God made everything for the whole of creation to share. And it's not for a Mbendjele to say this is mine and not yours, and it's not for a gorilla to either. And so because the farmers behave like gorillas and get really stroppy coming out with sticks when you just walk across their farms, well, they're actually gorillas. And according to the Mbendjele, when farmers die, they are reincarnated as gorillas in the forest. And that's their way that's how Komba gives them a bit of a tease for being so mean and horrible. Komba is the creator and decides where people go after they die. What's interesting about the Mbendjele is their version of heaven is actually is a part of the forest. It's in the same forest as people live out their lives, but the camp's managed by Komba, the creator. And so there's always meat, there's always honey, there's always something to dance about. It's just, the good life in this life is heaven, actually. And so the idea that there's some place where you'll have cherubs singing to you and lots of maidens and watermelons and whatever it is just a patriarchal fantasy, of course. But the real thing is that heaven is here. It's up to us to make this place heaven or hell. And that's something that all of us are responsible for. So the Mbendjele, there is this immediate return, which are the hunter-gatherers, delayed return, which are the villagers. And the Mbendjele say that, well, we're more like chimpanzees. We love to party. Chimpanzees do love a party. They're not very good at it, but they do love doing it. And the Mbendjele always laugh when they're having their parties because they can't get the drumming right. The beat's really out. And then it stops for a bit and comes on. And but they do love a party and they do like to laugh and they're not really bothered about territory quite the same way that gorillas are. And so when the Bantus love to say, "Oh, you chimpanzees, you," and they think it's really insulting, the Mbendjele don't mind at all and they laugh. And I even have a friend who, when he gets drunk, looks like a chimpanzee. It's just how his face falls. And so the Bantus all call him chimpanzee. And he doesn't mind. And so when we're in camp, his friends call him chimpanzee too. And it's really no problem because there isn't this whole sense of hierarchy of human beings being these things so much above other animals. There's much more a sense of we are a community of creatures sharing this forest and doing it. So anyway, there are various ways that anthropologists have tried to categorize this. Alan Barnard calls it the foraging mode of production. Nuritba David, working with South Indian hunter-gatherers, she calls it the giving environment, understanding the forest as a parent that, like your parents, you don't measure how much your parents have given you. It's just a process. You need something, you ask them, and they give it to you. Maybe not as adults, but certainly as children.
Foraging mode of
thought. Foraging mode of thought. Sorry, thank you. That's what I've got written here. Actually, I didn't read it. Alan Barnard is the foraging mode of thought that he calls it. But there is something very characteristic when you're in this immediate return mentality. It is a different headspace to be in to delayed return one. So this is a picture of sharing. Now, and this is how economic equality is maintained. As soon as you see something that somebody's not using, your book. Let me share your book. Give me your book is what I would say if I needed to use your book. And because you're not using it, the politeness, the sort of standards would mean that you have to give it to me. And then you'll watch me and then you want your book back. And so you'll wait till I finish and I'll put it on here and say, "No, give me that book." But maybe I'll walk off with it. And then you go, "Oh, he's gone now." if you really cherish that book. But you wouldn't be able to complain about it. You would be in the wrong if you started to make a fuss about it. So when we think about sharing, if I have a big bag of sweets and I give you some and I give you some and I give you some, but I don't give Ragga and Chris any, and then I'll give you some and I give you some. Ragga and Chris are sitting there, "Why didn't you share with me? What's wrong with me?" And start feeling a bit miffed. And you go, "Oh, isn't he nice? He's such a sharer." And I'm feeling all good. But that's not sharing from the hunter-gatherer. That's all about power. Because by selecting who I share with, I am actually influencing. So what's happened in this picture is Makongo over here has killed a pig, weighs 80 kg, and he's carried it all the way back to camp so that it can be shared. This isn't tolerated theft, Blurton Jones and all this, This is, if someone's stealing from me, I'm not going to bring the carcass of meat for an hour on my back to have it stolen from me. He's deliberately wanting to share his meat. Why does he want to share his meat? Because his hunting success depends on anything he hunts being properly shared among all the people present. And if it's not properly shared, his hunting will get ruined. And he doesn't want his hunting to be ruined. So what's happening here is Makongo, when he came in with the meat, he wouldn't have been able to hide it because all the kids start shouting, "Ngale, Ngale," and everyone would hear, "Oh, loads of meat's just arrived in camp." There's no way that he could stash it in his hut and not be noticed. And in fact, what happened was Mbatiti, this young man here, whose wife is menstruating so he can't go hunting, took the pig And he butchered it. And this elderly man, Tato, his wife is pregnant. And so he can't go hunting either. So these two men were the only two men in camp when Makongo returned. And Mbatiti cut up the meat, and then Tato shared it out. And you can see the women waiting here for their portions. And these kids, likewise, are going to take each portion. And Tato is thinking, right, well, that family, they've got those extra widows who live with them. They need a bit of a big, give them that piece. And this family, well, they've only got a couple of young kids, give them that. And the pig is being distributed. And Makongo is just sitting there, making sure that it's properly shared. Because that is what will maintain his ekila intact. And he will not refer to his hunting success as sort of a random way of, just, oh, I'm good in the forest. He said, no, my Aquila is good. I look after my Aquila. And I often ask people, so-and-so, he's actually a good hunter, is he? They said, no, he keeps his Aquila intact. He doesn't sleep around, is often what people say. Sleeping around ruins your Aquila. If you're in the process of building babies, making babies, you don't sleep around. You really maintain your Aquila intact. And this is quite sort of odd, really, from a Western point of view, because it really is central to the way that we think of ourselves as autonomous agents moving around. Here, you're constantly bound to different people in different ways, and Aquila is the language with which people express that as a series of prohibitions. And I'll get into that quickly now. So that's not to say that you don't get people who are rascals. This old lady, I never normally point anyone out, but she is a nightmare. I mean, it just, when you look at this photo, all the kids are screaming. This little kid, I don't know if you can see that, is screaming. This little kid's screaming. This little kid, poor kid, has probably become immune to her vitriol. But, she's someone who's always hiding things in her basket, always trying to dodge sharing. And whenever she suspects somebody else of not sharing, she grabs the basket off the women, she's tipping it upside down and shouting. And, anyway. But so there are people who who try and avoid this, but they become, the object of, or subject to a lot of insults. People will avoid this lady like the plague. If they see her in a camp, we're not going to stay here long. We're just going off to somewhere else. And people do avoid those who don't follow these beliefs. Anyway, as I said, the most egalitarian gender relations in these societies, and it's caused by solidarity. And the basic idea is that menstrual blood angers animals or causes them to flee. So dangerous animals like elephants, gorillas, buffaloes, snakes, when they smell menstrual blood, they get stroppy, they get angry, and they just follow that smell and they'll charge. And so it will be a big group of people, but it's just one person who's menstruating. Bang! The buffalo comes and wallops that person. And the reason is they smell of menstrual blood, and it's with a group of hunters. I remember we went out hunting one day, and there was the old man Fata. He was smoking these really stinky black tobacco, like Gitan cigarettes. I thought, of course you're just telling everyone we're here, so why don't you stop smoking? I didn't say it, but I was thinking, God, what's he doing? And then we came back from this unsuccessful hunt. And then other people too started blaming Cabello, another guy who was in the group, who'd been completely silent, hadn't made it, just been really nice. And they said, it's because your wife's pregnant, you should have been hunting. You should have stayed in the camp with her, you just ruined our hunt. And everyone started. And basically, the Cabellos joined to his wife because she's pregnant. And why is that? Well, it's because of folk biological views that the Mbendjele have about procreation. And this really explains why Aquila matters. So when a woman is menstruating, that is the high point of her fertility. So if you really want to make sure your wife's pregnant, you have sex while she's menstruating. And you keep having sex every day, until that baby's ready to be born. And the idea is that actually what women's wombs do is this very extraordinary, miraculous business of transforming semen into children. And so you need to supply your woman with lots of semen so that child grows strong and becomes a healthy baby. And what that does is it connects both man, husband and wife into the process of gestation that's going on inside the woman's body. So there isn't this idea of a one-off deposit and gone, and then who knows if I can keep him or not. There's the idea of this is a joint venture. This is something we're doing together. And so all the taboos, the Akila taboos, are placed on both husband and wife. And it's why a husband mustn't sleep around. And neither must the wife sleep around while she's pregnant and child rearing. After that, it's more relaxed. But
did the stinky tobacco have any purpose?
He just liked smoking, you know.
So it was no problem to anyone?
Well, no one pointed it out. I thought, you know, logically, from my sort of rational point of view, this is crazy, we're just spoiling the forest. But that wasn't from their point of view. That wasn't at all the case. And so this business of smelling of Akila from your vagina really makes women frightened of going into the forest alone. And it did astonish me. I thought, but you guys live in the forest. When I asked the women, oh, do you like walking? They go, oh no, we're frightened. Oh, what? And I really did. It took me years to figure it out. Anyway, I finally realised it was because of this smell. And so what women do instead is they walk in big groups in the forest. They surround themselves with noisy children who make so much racket that any animals that might be close by flee long before the women arrive there. And so they avoid any risk. And that doing things together, because of this fear, creates extraordinary solidarity between the women. And this is what gives women such political force and power in these societies. And next week, I'll try, if I can, we took some wonderful film of the women doing some of their rituals when we were there in September. And, I mean, you'll love it, Camilla. You'll go, whoa! But they really are crazy.
You didn't break any secrets and taboos, did you?
No, this is the stuff they do publicly, so you can share it. They're doing it for the men, actually, as you will see when you see, if I can isolate this piece of footage.
You have to give us the lyrics as well.
Yeah, the lyrics. Yeah. Anyway, so the solidarity of the women is an astonishing force, and it really is that which ensures that men can never dominate women in this society. And you know, a man who starts beating his wife, very quickly her sisters will come around, and I've seen it happen many times, and start beating the hell out of him with big long sticks. And you know, you can see it really waking up from his sort of craziness and calming down very fast. And the other way that women, only women can do this, which is called mwajo, and it's basically a reenactment. So anything that someone does that's stupid, or just, you know, plain against the egalitarianism of the society, gets reenacted by old ladies like this. And they will reenact it without saying who it is, without giving any indication of what it is they're doing. They just start. You can just suddenly tell, oh, the women are doing this now. Everyone starts looking, at first curiously, trying to figure out, is it me? And then once they're sort of fairly confident it isn't me, they start laughing because they're really good at doing this, and they make it really funny. And they do this sort of scene, and then they loop the scene, and they keep looping it, and keep looping it, and keep looping it. And they go on and on. And then you suddenly realise, ooh, so-and-so's not laughing. And you realise who they're sort of castigating, basically.
That's very sophisticated psychology.
It is very and they won't stop until they laugh. And so when that person laughs, it's happened to me, and you're feeling really and you're getting really stroppy and ha ha ha. No, it's not good enough. And then you start laughing, and then it all dissolves and it's over. But sometimes it's too much, and I've seen men just run in the forest, you know, and they just can't take it, because it's not just you hearing all these things about yourself. It's your kids hearing it. It's your wife hearing it. It's your mum, your dad, your brother, your best mate. Everybody's hearing it. Oh my God, you know, and they just run off and then come back a few hours later when everything's died down again. But sometimes the ladies start it up again when they see it. You know, they really are. But if men try and do this, it's a disaster. It starts causing fights. You know, the other guy comes, well, yeah, poof, 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 and then off it goes. So it really is a very special power of women to do this. And the solidarity that they have is, at heart, comes from Akila, comes from this menstruation. And honey is a crucial thing that people are really interested in. And it goes back to the creation myth, which I probably don't have time to tell you. You wanted me to stop at 8?
I don't want you to stop.
I'm sorry.
We have no right to stop you. No. I don't have to stop you anyway. No, just keep on. Keep on if you feel. Keep going.
Well, I haven't got to the moon yet, so
keep on.
No, keep going.
Keep going.
All right, I'm sorry, guys. This is another plan. But all right. Well, what I'll do is maybe I can tell you the creation myth.
Tell us the story. Yeah.
You want it?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So this is some honey is really important to people, and it's very dangerous to get it. A lot of my male friends have had serious falls when you climb these trees. He's going up there. That's where the hive is, and he's just got this liana around this thing, and he sort of puts it up, and then he chop a few more footholes in the thing, get his feet up, and then he lifts it up further, and he keeps going. It's really exhausting. And then once he gets to the top, he's got a whole swarm of bees going for him, and he's got to stay calm, not panic, not try and jump down, just stay there. Even though, and you see these guys come down there, can't see out one eye, their lips all swollen, they can't breathe through one nostril. Oh, really good honey, isn't it? But anyway, honey is really central as a mediating substance between men and women. And if I'm a young man and I want to marry someone, or I really take a fancy to a girl, I bring her honey. And that is a crucial thing. And all you boys out there, remember to bring your girls sweet things from time to time if you want to keep them sweet, because it really does matter. And it goes right back to this creation myth, which I will tell very rapido. And so in the beginning, when Komba created the forest, he didn't tell the men and women that they each existed. So you had sort of 20-odd women living over there in one part of the forest and 20-odd men living over here. And the men screwed these, they're weird, these sort of hard forest fruit. They're not fruit like I've ever seen before. They grow just randomly in the middle of the trunk like that. And then they fall off, and they've got this hard outer shell. And then inside they've got this really semen white substance. And the men would masturbate with these things, and they used to keep them in their huts and get sore willies because the outer shell is so hard and rough. We just had some really good stories telling on this for the film that we were making. And that was their business. Whereas the women, they had that spirit that you will have seen right at the beginning. Where is he? Ajengi. This is Ajengi. So the women danced to Jengi, and as Ajengi spun, little baby girls would drop out of the mondimba, the special leaves that are used there. And they just carried on, and the women were fishing, collecting wild yams and fruit and other things that you can get from the ground. The men were collecting honey, hunting elephants, pigs and other animals, and they just were getting on with it. And then one day the old man, and I'll tell you the men's version. The men's version, the men are the people who do all the stuff. In the women's version, of course, the main protagonists are women, not men. But because I'm a man, I'll tell you the male version. And maybe my wife can tell you the female version some other time. But so what happened was Tuli, this elder man, he'd been out with the lads, they'd been collecting honey, and he just suddenly got a feeling, I should go and hunt elephant by myself. So he took his spear and he started walking. And he thought, I'm going to go into this area of forest which I haven't been to before, because maybe there are lots of elephants there. And so as he was walking, crossing rivers and finding his way, he suddenly came across this riverhead, and floating down the river was a little piece of wild yam. And he looked at that and he said, only people wash yams before eating them. And it's true, only people do wash yams because they're covered in mud, so you rinse them off. There must be people up that river. And so he starts quietly walking up the river. And as he gets up towards the head of the river, he hears amazing singing. And he thinks, oof, that's beautiful. And he starts looking through the undergrowth to see what's behind there. And he sees these women dancing. And he can't help himself. He walks forward. And of course, what's happened? He's got a huge erection. All the women go, whoa, what's that? And because he's only one person, they don't feel too frightened, and so they start coming together, and instinctively they start making love, and he makes love to these women. Whoa, this is wonderful, those Mapumbe are terrible. I better go and tell the guys about this. And so he runs off, And back to the men at their camp, he says, "Oh guys, I just found this wonderful thing called women. You won't believe it." And they say, "Oh, shut up, old man. You're just a liar telling us stories. We don't believe you." He says, "No, it's true. I'll take you there tomorrow morning." And they say, "Oh, yeah." He says, "No, look, just make sure you bring your parcels of honey. Every man must bring his honey." They had a really good find of honey, so each man had a nice big, and they do these leaf parcels to wrap up with the honey. And so off they go. And there's a particular, and so they follow the rivers and they get to the riverhead, and as they're coming up they hear the singing, and Tony whispers, "Okay, Ofienga." So when we're pig hunting, what we do, Ofienga. And then we use animal calls and sign language to encircle the herd of pigs. And because we know each other so well from dancing together and singing together, you just have an instinctive understanding of what the other person's going to do. It's a very interesting consequence of spending long hours dancing together. And so I'll know that so-and-so, he's likely, judging by the movement of the pigs here, I heard him giving his bird call over there, so I know he's going to be the one to strike first. I'll feel it. It's just an instinctive reaction. And indeed, he comes in with his spear, the pigs scatter in every direction, and I've got my pig coming towards me, and boom, and I shove in my spear. And because we're all around in the forest, around the pigs, we can kill 3 or 4 pigs in one go if we're lucky. And this is one of the favourite hunting activities of Mbendjele men. Ofienga! But it's the women dancing a jengi. And we all spread out, and we've all got our parcels of honey. And then Tolly, the old man, "Yeah, I'm back!" And he walks straight in, and he fancies the old lady. So he goes up and he bashes her on the head with his leaf parcel of honey. All the other women, start running off in every direction. Of course, the men are waiting in the forest there. And as soon as the woman comes running, poof, hits her with honey, starts running down. She's still running, but then the honey starts to go into her mouth. The creatures that give me something this week can't be all bad, and so she slows down a bit. And then eventually, is he following me? Oh, there he is. And they come together, and each man takes a woman for himself. And the men, and this was interesting, the women just now were saying, and the men were saying, "Oh, I want 3 of them, I want 4 of them, I want 4 or 5 of them." And the women said, "No. 1 woman, 1 man. 1 penis, 1 woman.
1 woman, 1 penis.
Yeah, 1 woman, 1 penis. And which fits nicely, yes. And so each man and each woman came together and made love and decided this is the way forward. And the women sort of thought, yeah, these guys are nice, bringing us these good things, honey and meat, was something they brought as well. And so they said, all right, well, look, if you're going to be here to make children for us, well, we'll give you a jengi, which is why you see a jengi with the men here and not with the women. And you make sure you keep bringing us all this meat and stuff, and we'll have sex together, and that will be society as we know it today. So and it's continued since then in that fashion. And what's remarkable is that the division of labour still reflects this initial difference between men and women. So women will fish, collect wild yams and so on. In other words, they don't need men. And men don't need women. I mean, of course we do for other reasons, but as far as sustenance goes, each is independent. And that potential for independence is crucial for the power relations between the genders. It really is at the heart. There's no way you can force a woman to stay with you, because she can go and live and make her own life as she needs to without your help. Men sort of emphasise they took a jengi by force because they like to sort of be a bit macho, whereas the women say, look, we gave them a jengi, that's because we kept even more important things for ourselves. And that one of them is ngoku, which is this very rude dance the women do to insult men in their genitals rather effectively. One of the crucial things, because men need circumcision, but women are born with perfect genitals, men are obviously inferior. Anyway, they've got all sorts of songs about that kind of thing. So, what this, well, part of what I'm trying to describe here is how, living when you live like this, your cosmology is part and parcel of making sense of your everyday. So you can't, when you understand the creation myth, you understand why women have autonomy. You understand why men control a jengi, but through the kindness of women. You start to, and every time you dance a jengi, actually, women go crazy. It's a really sexually charged event. And start to grope and otherwise sexually harass men in ways that Westerners find very distressing and disturbing if they come to stay with me in the forest. If you're married, women won't, but if you're a single man, beware. Women are very... I just went with a friend of mine. He wanted his 2 young teenage sons to know what the forest was like, so he came to visit. And the girls couldn't let off, And this one 16-year-old boy, he was really like, oh, he's never had girls like that before, grabbing him by the balls. Oh, no, it's disgusting. No. It was really bad. But these things make... When you understand the myths, the cosmology, the taboos, suddenly you start to make sense of your place in the world, not as this unique moment of self-created whatever it is, but as this continuity with a deep past that continues to inform and explain the way you are in the present and why things are the way they are. So I'll just, anyway, and so the separation in the camps and so on, is all part and parcel of that living mythology of women still having that solidarity to resist and say to men no. Actually, and I've seen women say no to the men, and we're just stuck. The whole camp just collapses because the women refuse to agree with what the men say, and the women basically win over at the end because of the strength of their solidarity. So what the Mbendjele say is that a woman's first husband is the moon, or a woman's biggest husband is the moon. And the moon is used as a euphemism for menstruation, to put in the moon. Us men, unless we've managed to make her pregnant, the moon will always get in there. So that's why we call the moon her biggest husband or her first husband, because regardless of us, he'll always be coming back and making love to her. They have different euphemisms which we would call making love. And it's also called Akila. So when a woman menstruates, she is Akila. Her menstrual blood is called Akila. Akila is a polysemic word. It has all sorts of different meanings. And that makes it curious for people who are used to words having very clear meanings, and that's how you use them. But it does that as a way of creating a sense of connectedness in your mind, but without presenting you with what the connections are. So your wife's menstruation is called Akila. When she's menstruating, you're Akila. When I go hunting and I'm successful in hunting, it's because I've been looking after my Akila. When I shouldn't eat bongo antelope, it's because the bongo antelope's Akila. There are all sorts of different things that are Akila, but you just don't know what's linking them. But the fact of the name being the same starts to make any naturally curious human being reflect upon the relationships between them. And this is why I mentioned in the earlier part about this business of culture changing as you move through life. Akila is deliberately structured to address different concerns of people, and I'll quickly go into that. But first, I just want to read out a friend of mine who I was asking to explain to me, because I started to get confused about what is Akila. It's actually taken me pretty much 15 years to figure it out, though it sounds very straightforward as I talk to you, or perhaps not so straightforward, because of my inadequate presentation. Akila is the same as Mubeku. This is my friend Emeka. That's the name of the medicine god Komba sent women when women put in the moon, i.e. menstruate. The business of Akila was first with them. It's all about children. You can see women's tummies swell up at that time. It's the wind. They have to expel their wind. There's Akila, blood he means in this point. This cleans out their wounds. If that Akila, blood, stays in the body, it will make the woman ill. She has to get rid of it. If she doesn't do Akila, then she has to do Akila. This is how it should be. Women's biggest husband is the moon. If I'm a hunter, I don't sleep around with different women. If I slept with her and then her and then her and then her, all the animals would know. They'd smell my smell and know, that hunter has ruined his own Akila, i.e. he's ruined his hunting. Some will come with great anger. Others, you'll shoot at them, but they won't die, and you'll be very surprised. When you shoot at an antelope from close range and it doesn't die, we call this Akila. So I then ask him, does a good hunter have strong Akila? And he answers, if someone's hunting is good, They won't say his Aquila is strong. They'll say, he hasn't ruined his Aquila. Even a great hunter who sleeps around with women all over the place will ruin his hunting. We call a man who's ruined his hunting with women Matena. And so I ask him, why do you call all this Aquila? And he answers, we Yaka call all this Aquila because our fathers called it that. This whole business comes from our forebears. Women's blood is one thing, men killing animals is another. Komba made it like this. When women put in the moon, it's mobeku. Men's mobeku is just nose bleeding. That's an interesting comment, but anyway. Men's Aquila is about hunting. The hunter's meat is Aquila. If someone else eats your hunter's meat, i.e. your Aquila, then your hunting is ruined. So what happens through these range of different understandings of male and female relationships to Aquila is that you have different bodily comportments starting to evolve. So walking in the forest, because of Aquila, is gendered. So men walk like this, silently, single file, not making a noise, all ears, listening to what's going on around them. Whereas women go out in these big groups of noisy kids, scampering here and there, and joking and screaming and shouting, and they sing as they walk in the forest. And they sing loudly, and there's a particular type of yodel, a very beautiful type of yodel, that they do as they walk in the forest. And it's a yodel which is said to quieten the spirits of the animals, make them feel quiet and relaxed and start getting sleepy, so they're easier for us alert men to kill. Premenopausal women fear large animals because they smell of Aquila. And actually, there are a lot of large animals in this forest. There are 15,000 Mbendjele, and the conservationists estimate there are 23,000 gorillas. And gorillas really aren't, furry, cuddly things. They are strong, fierce, and potentially very dangerous animals. More people I know have been attacked by gorillas than pretty much any other animal. There are 9,000 elephants, 4,500 chimpanzees. So, 15,000 people are not predominant, we are not the dominant force in that forest. It's all these other animals too that are very important. And so the risk that women feel is genuine. There really is a risk from these animals. So long as a man has not recently had sex or been sleeping near menstruating or pregnant women, he won't smell of human Aquila. And so he'll be able to pass without offending the animals. And this results in women orientating themselves inwards towards the heart of society, whereas men end up going outwards towards the dangerous animals or neighbouring villagers to get stuff and bring it back into the heart. And then women transform it through cooking into something which is safe for all people, all the community to consume, so that children grow strong and the community maintains itself. So these basic beliefs about Aquila. So for instance, this animal, which is a blue duiker, very common to eat in the forest, is taboo if you're pregnant. But it's so commonly killed that it's a real problem for a woman. Why do people not eat it when they're pregnant? Because when it's running away, it does this with its head. It looks back as it's running. And if you have a baby in your womb, and it starts to do that, you'll have a breech birth, and that's very serious. And so what they say is that by eating the duiker, you will cause your baby to be breech, and so it's taboo. So basic beliefs about Aquila and the piecemeal explanations given for them differentiate people according to gender and to a lesser extent according to age. So a child, very young children, they don't have any Aquila taboos. They can eat anything and everything that they like. And their mother may well choose to cook for them an Aquila animal and not eat it herself, but the kid will eat this delicious food and say, isn't that lovely? But my mum's not eating it. And that trigger will start the process of wondering about Aquila. But that will just be left. No one will explain anything. They'll just know these foods are Aquila, and I can eat them, but my mother can't. And I love food. And kids do, it really is, food is a big deal for children. We get more casual about it, but for kids it's a big deal. And it's not until their adolescence that suddenly something changes. So if a girl starts, her sisters or she starts menstruating, then she starts hearing people talking about Aquila again. And she starts seeing that there are all these things. We can't move camp. My brothers who are sleeping, everyone sleeps in the same bed. They can't go hunting because of my sister or my menstruation. as a boy starts walking out accompanying hunters, because now by the age of 9 or 10 he's strong enough to keep up, he will start hearing them explaining why we missed that animal or something else because of a killer, or why we were charged by a buffalo because of a killer, and start to appreciate, or the hunter's meat is called a killer. That all these things will start puzzling. And once he kills his first animal, his mother or father will come and explain some of the things about a killer to him. Or when a girl has her first menstruation, her mother will come and explain how she needs to treat the blood that she is now producing, because that blood is very potent. And there are all sorts of spirits that get very attached to that blood, and so she has to dispose of it very carefully and very particularly. And then as you get married and you start the business of wanting to procreate and have children, well, then this whole business of akila becomes even more. There are all these foods like lovely blue daikas you suddenly can't eat. And you're constantly being told to stop sleeping around, it's bad for your akila, you're going to ruin your akila, your children, your wife, pregnancy is going to be difficult, when she gives birth she's going to have problems and complications and so on, and likewise for women. And so the whole business of akila starts to build up as you move through life, and the akila seem to be anchored onto these key moments of human society. And it doesn't matter where you live in the world, these basic elements of finding food, of menstruation, sex, they have to happen if you are to procreate, if you are to perpetuate your community. And so it really is at the heart of it. And so there are ways of cheating the spirits when they're after this blood. So a woman who's pregnant, for instance, if her husband still needs to go hunting, she slices her stomach, and the blood that's taken out from that is mixed with the forest equivalent of ochre, which is Mbendjele. It's a particular tree which you scrape, and it produces a very bright red colour. And people, when we're doing initiations and rituals, will always wash ourselves in this. And so this Mbendjele is then mixed with the blood from the woman's stomach, and whenever the husband or her other children need to go in the forest, they smear it on their forehead, and as they walk they let the wind take it, and this takes that smell of her blood to the spirits, because what's happened when she stops menstruating, those spirits that were eating or feeding from that strong, powerful blood won't get any more food, and so they get angry with the husband, and they can cause problems for him when he goes in the forest. So by doing this, putting this little sort of homeopathic dose of her blood on his forehead, he appeases those spirits and can go and do his hunting safely.
You're going to say that thing about the men sort of getting run over on the moon as well. When they laugh, they have that rivalry between the men and the moon. So.
What, in Malobir?
The man trying to get his wife pregnant,
and then
yeah.
starts joking the moon.
When a man, one of the ways we say we've got our wife pregnant is, we cheated the moon, and it's because he's the first husband, so we have to cheat him in order to get our wife pregnant. And there is a very real sense in which the moon is an active part of society. So akila prescriptions pan out to define which animals people can eat, whether they will hunt as a man or cook forest animals as a woman. Doesn't mean men don't cook, but just that these are, whether their style of speech in the forest is loud and song-like, or quiet and restrained, and whether they walk alone or walk in groups. And so menstruation is culturally elaborated to become clearly expressed differences between the sexes, and a gender ideology that defines appropriate activities and behaviour. And Mbendjele mostly discuss akila in a practical idiom. Breach of the rules surrounding akila cause practical problems, like unsuccessful hunting or difficult childbirth. And the gendered experience of akila and its associated prescriptions makes gender roles seem logical and natural. It just, of course, I'm menstruate, therefore I shouldn't hunt. Women aren't silly. If an animal runs past, they'll kill it. But the way they kill it is without drawing blood. They'll never pierce the animal. So they'll club it, or they'll pick it up by the hind legs and swing it round to break its neck. But they won't pierce. And that piercing action that men do is that really is important. Similarly, when people fight, they never want to pierce each other. You can bash and thump as much as you like, but you don't penetrate, that shed blood. It really is a massive Akila. So the bodily practices, discipline and behaviour which Akila prescriptions demand serve to justify the key cultural distinctions between what is seen as proper and natural for men and women to do, between obtaining vitality from outside the group and transforming vitality into new human life within the group. So Akila defines how the body's vital forces, reproductive potential and productive activities and their products, moral and personal qualities, as well as emotions, should be shared properly, but shared in a way which will ensure that people experience good health, unproblematic childbirth, child rearing and successful hunting and gathering. And from a Mbendjele perspective, this is heaven. There is no other, that is the good life when all these things are working together. So social, and this perhaps just to return to the beginning, social equality here is not about annihilating difference. Quite the contrary, it's about recognising difference, but not attributing different status to those differences. And that really is crucial. And perhaps just to end, I don't know if you can see that really, but it is self-evident that each individual, through the conjunction between your genetic inheritance and your encounter with the environment around you, develop differently to other people, and thank God, of course, that happens. But why on earth do we attribute different status values to those differences? That is extraordinary. When I look at two zebras or two elephants, or I don't say, "Oh, you're a higher status elephant than you are." They're just two elephants or blades of grass. I look at a field of grass. I'm not there judging the status of different blades of grass. Of course, each one's different, but why should I? It does seem extraordinary, and it's cultural, that we should attribute status to difference. And what the Mbendjele show through this process of Akila is that you can be different, you can recognize difference without attributing status to those differences. And so equality is not about sameness, and we have a problem because of the word we've chosen, egalitarian or equality. It's like the equal sign in a mathematical equation. So we think one side has to be the same as the other, but actually that's not how egalitarianism in human relationships works, because one side is often not equal to the other. You might be stronger, you might be more beautiful, you might be smarter, whatever. The point is to make the outcome equal, but not to make some sort of ideological claim that we all begin from an equal footing. We don't. But the art of living in an egalitarian society is to ensure that those differences in ability don't pan out into differences in status. Okay, thanks very much for your attention.